Good evening, good evening, good evening. Today is June 29th and it's 2022. And we are on the very tail end of what we have come to know as LGBTQ Pride Month. Pride Month or Pride is connected to the Stonewall riots in New York City in 1969. So we're very excited. I'm very excited on behalf of AFH, AIDS Foundation Houston, as the Chief Health Officer, to come to you on this evening to bring you a Soul Talk, Conversations That Heal, with a focus around um, living a proud life, and how LGBTQ people show up with our proud selves, with all of who we are. I learned a very long time ago, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, so not that long. I still had hair and it wasn't gray. How to bring every part of who I am into a room when I enter it, regardless of where that room was and regardless of who was in the room or who was going to be in the room. It became very important to me to be me. And in being myself, I lost some people along the way. Some of them I got back, some of them I didn't. But I gained a whole lot more people. I gained an entire community. Um, and I'm so excited about that. In being myself, I sleep better, I walk through life better. And so that's why I wanted tonight's Soul Talk to be centered around living a proud life. So tonight, I want you to join me in welcoming my panel members. I'm just going to say their names and they're going to come out and they're going to tell you about them. First of all, I want to welcome my friend, Natalie Adams. Come on out, Natalie.
Hello, hello. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Jeffrey. Thank you so
Good
much for having
evening.
me. I would just like to introduce myself by saying my pronouns are she, her. I work in HIV prevention, and I also do advocacy work around disaster recovery, social justice, and whatever else is needed around the city of Houston.
Welcome, Natalie. I am so happy you are here with us on tonight. And I'll tell you a little secret. You are one of the reasons why we have the topic that we have on tonight on by erasure. So thank you for that. Thank you for that inspiration. And next, I want to introduce our next panel member. He's a really great friend of mine, and that's all I'm going to say. So come on out, Dr. Daryl Shorter.
Hey, Jeffrey, it's good to see you. It's nice to be on the panel with you, Natalie. And good evening to everyone that is tuning in. My name is Daryl Shorter, and I am a psychiatrist and an addictions mental health specialist. I do primarily outpatient work here in the city of Houston, taking care of folks that are trying to evaluate their relationship to alcohol and drugs, and also that are struggling with serious mental illness. I do a lot of talking about LGBTQ related mental health conditions and issues, and I'm really happy to be here tonight. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thank you, Daryl, for being with us on this evening. I know y'all see me looking around and looking down and all of that, and that's because I am trying to make sure that we are, yay. I wasn't sure if we had been ported over onto the AFH Facebook page and we're live. So we're live for everybody. Well, I've got one more awesome guest for us this evening. I want to just bring him out, let him tell you who he is, Mr. Byron Kennedy.
Hey everybody. Hi, my name is Byron Kennedy. My pronouns are he, him. And thank you, Jeffrey, for inviting me to be a guest on this really awesome show. Hello to Natalie and Dr. Shorter. My career focus, I'd say I'm a person of many, many hats. But my three concentration areas are filmmaking, education, and entrepreneurship. As a filmmaker, my specialty center of focus are documentaries. As an educator, I am a professor at the College of Business at University of Houston downtown. And as an entrepreneur, I am a retail comic book shop owner. I am the owner, proprietor of Gulf Coast Cosmos Comic Book Shop, located in Third Ward, Houston, Texas. With all of that being said, my love of arts and community are what help me to ensure that all of those hats fit properly.
Excellent. Thank you, Byron. Look, if nobody wants to acknowledge it, Byron, we love your voice. It's amazing. I knew I could make you smile. I knew it. I knew that would make you smile. Look, he's shaking. All right, great. So great. So tonight, look, AFH, who brings you this show tonight, we are in the 40th year of our existence. AFH is the oldest HIV serving organization in the state of Texas. And in the middle of us turning 40, we're doing some very significant things as we are being very intentional about ending the HIV epidemic in the greater Houston area, not just addressing HIV, but bringing it to an end. So, tonight we're going to talk about AFH here and there, but we are really dedicating this show to the lives of the queer community, individuals who have been served by this organization, who may no longer be with us in the physical sense, but they're with us somewhere, and individuals that we currently serve, who are just such a great part of why about 65 people get up every morning, Monday through Friday, and go to this place that we know as our place of employment, AFH. And it is really important for me to say that I feel called to the work that I do, not just about HIV and the prevention of HIV, but the work that I do within our queer community. I'm going to say queer most of the time tonight, simply because to say LGBTQ, IA plus, that's a whole lot. So I hope that we're all good with that. And I just want to send out some love to our Pride Houston committee that put on a fabulous Pride 2022 this year. It was an amazing event. We are still recuperating from it. The working, the partying, the being out in the heat, the pool party, the parade, the festival. We all need a really long nap. But with that, I want to dive into tonight's show. And Natalie, I want to just throw a question your way. You're a Black woman who shows up in the world every day on the queer spectrum as bisexual. What do you think is one of the most important decisions that you have made that has given life to who you are?
Thank you for that question. It's a very, very heavy question because it's what has made you able to be you, right? And when I sit and think about it, it may not be the most popular answer, but honestly, for me, it was when I let go of religion. So I'm also non-religious. I grew up Baptist. I'm born and raised in Houston, and spent years in the old school Baptist church, and then a few years in the Prosperity Church, and all of it. And I tell the story that I walked away from an abusive marriage and an abusive church on the same day. And that's a whole other story, right? But it was that decision to really just throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you will, do all my research and all that other kind of stuff. And this is not a debate on that. But for me personally, when I let go of that, I let go of the guilt and the shame that had been dogging me my whole life. right? The guilt and the shame that when I knew early on that I had attractions to both, or not even just both, but all the spectrum that's out there, right? That guilt and shame was very just, no, you can't be that way. And and I grew up with queer community members, queer family members. I loved all of them, but there was still that guilt and shame in the back of your head, and it was just a lot. And I feel like, honestly, when I let go of all of that, I was really able to come into my full self, my full being, and accept every single part of myself, and not just accept it, but embrace it, celebrate it, enjoy it. And I have enjoyed it, and it really started with that decision for me personally.
Wow. So I'm going to say this because Daryl and I talk a lot. I know when you said that part about letting go of an abusive marriage and an abusive church, that Daryl turned about 15 backflips. Maybe those were mine. Maybe I turned 14, Daryl turned 1, because that's a conversation that we kind of have a lot. And that is something, and I want to appreciate you so much because, first of all, I'm overwhelmed by your response, but because a lot of times we hear, particularly men, and more particularly Black gay men, talk about the struggle with the church and who they are. And so to hear a Black woman say, similarly, I struggled and I was abused and I made some choices that put me in some abusive situations that were rooted and grounded in the relationship I had with the church. Thank you for that. Because a lot of people, we're not having that conversation about women. Not when it comes to women who are on the queer spectrum. We don't like to say it out loud. We do have a conversation about women being abused by leaders of the church.
Yes.
Women as girls, as adolescents, as teenagers, as young adults, even as the mothers of the church, who it may no longer be sexual, but it may be financial. And it may be this burden of, if you, sister so-and-so, if you don't do this, what we gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, there's, I know I'm probably giving you a lot that you didn't know before, but
I love it. Give it to me.
I actually wrote an essay specifically about Black women and Christianity from the civil rights movement forward, for a book about women and religion in general a few years ago. And one of the things that I really dove into, just doing the research and not wanting it to be solely about my experience, right? But statistically speaking, I'm sure it wouldn't surprise any of you that 80% of the people in churches are mostly women, mostly Black women. And as you mentioned, they are abused in a lot of ways, financially, especially. And, and a lot of times the pastor becomes this surrogate husband, and with everything that entails, right? And so, yeah, it's an issue. It's definitely an issue, and it's not a popular one to talk about. It's not, it's better, as you mentioned when you first introduced yourself. When I came to that realization, I lost some people, and some people came back. And some of them didn't. Some of them were like, nope, you go be a heathen over there and, do what you do. But it's real. And it is honestly the one thing that allowed me to be me fully.
Wow. I am now trying to share what we're doing on my Facebook page. So I'm coming back to you, Natalie. Byron. So being a Black man that identifies as bisexual, do you find that you're challenged by your own queer community to choose, air quotes? And if so, how has that impacted you?
Um, so I find myself, I'm going to answer your question, but I find myself challenged uh, by society, period. At just whether it is my queer brethren and sistren or my straight brethren and sistren. I'm either as a openly bisexual black man. I'm either too much of one thing or not enough of another, and also compounding on top of that, uh, male patriarchy. What is exactly does that look like as a black man? How do I present myself? If it wasn't for the fact that it's like, you know, at puberty, my voice cracked and fell down to the basement, I don't know how I would have been accepted by a large majority of my friends and family. It's still a constant challenge for me on a daily basis of, what do you know about, bisexuality? Aside from the stereotypes that you've learned, from media and us as queer people, we're still learning ourselves on a daily basis. So, what are the things that you do know versus what you don't know? I do find often that when I'm in queer spaces, and I do mention that I am bisexual, I'm either met with, "Oh no, you're not," because you're here, or it is, very few people say, "Oh, okay, cool, tell me more." So yeah, I'm often forced to either explain or choose or something, of that nature.
Hmm. Explain or choose.
Explain, yeah,
That's very interesting.
yeah.
Explain or
Explain
choose.
and choose. Yeah, it's like explain how are you bisexual, and come the challenge questions. But it's like, I've seen you with this dude, this dude, this dude, this dude. Okay, but you have not seen the rest of my life because I don't know you like that. Some people have, some people have not. But I mean, that's like anybody else's personal life. You only, people only see what they're allowed to see.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's true. You said something about when your when your voice cracked and dropped to the basement. If that had not happened, you're not sure how your family would have treated or accepted you. What does that mean?
Uh, so I come from a small country town in Central Texas where still the stereotypes remain, even with me being me. Unless I find myself being the poster child of the queer community when I go, and visit family. If I'm not constantly, educating and re-educating individuals, the stereotypes persist. So the one stereotype is, the man constantly speaking in falsetto, and just whatever our idea
Queen, the
of a
flaming queen.
non-heterosexual black man looks like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't always fit their stereotype. And it started with my voice.
I hear you, and that's what I wanted you to expound on it because I knew what you meant, and it is. And I say this with love. I do not say this in disrespect. I think the opposite of what you bring is the flaming queen.
Yeah,
Or I'm looking at a book now that's on my coffee table that's written by Dr. Marlon B. Ross, who is actually from my hometown because I'm from a small town too. But it's called Sissy Insurgencies, and
yeah,
the book. Get the book.
Yeah.
It's written in textbook style, but it's great. So it is that thing that the world or society, puts us, pigeonholes us as queer people, particularly queer men and queer women, that you
Yeah.
have to be a certain way. And if you don't show up in the world in that way, oh, that must not be who you are. Or if you show up in that way, then, oh, you gotta be, but a lot of people are not.
Right.
There are a lot of people who are not. So I like where you're going with that. And Daryl, I want to ask you from just a personal perspective and how you show up every day in the world, but also from a mental health perspective, to kind of weigh in on what you've heard from both Natalie and Byron already this evening.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone for your opening comments. In terms of the way that I show up personally in the world, I am an out gay Black man. I identify as cis. My pronouns are he and him. I think you probably see those in my name placard. And as we were thinking about and preparing for this panel today, I was trying to think through, like, well, how did I develop my own sense of pride or queer pride or gay pride, whatever that looked like for me. And I imagine that part of that was like what has been mentioned, evaluating and reevaluating and wrestling with my relationship with the church. I think that was a huge part of it for me. I think coming out or inviting in, whatever language you decide to use about your process of letting other folks know about your identity. And I think that there was a lot of it that was just really a fake it till you make it sort of thing also. Like, I'm just going to be in this space, be out, let people know that I have a boyfriend or a partner or a husband, and then just let that sit. And even though I may not always feel comfortable with that, or this is, now several years ago, just letting people sit with that and deciding at some point that I don't have to own someone else's reaction. That is actually not my business. It doesn't have to be my business, what they do with the information or with the news that I'm gay or queer or whatever I am. But I was faking that at first. I don't think I was always, I don't think I always felt safe or comfortable or supported in every environment that I was in, where I was doing that kind of work, which was a personal kind of work. And then I was also in my own therapy. I'm still in my own therapy. And I was processing it there as well, talking about like, oh, this is an area of continued growth for me. Why is it that in this area or with this group or in this conversation, I didn't feel comfortable coming out or inviting in, or I didn't own my authenticity or like the fullness of my humanity or my sexuality, like what's going on with me. So I had to do a lot of self-exploration around that as well. How that shows up in your mental health. And so I'm going to transition a little bit. And I'll pull in some of the other stuff that people have been talking about, because really there's a term that I have been using. I don't know if I came up with it first. I think I did, but I'm going to say I did. This term called homonormativity. Like there's a right and a wrong way to be queer. Like we all sort of know that there is a kind of idealized or an idea or a perception of how queer people are supposed to show up in the world. We're supposed to look a certain way. We're supposed to act a certain way. We're supposed to be a certain way. We're supposed to have a certain kind of body. We're supposed to inhabit certain types of bodies. Like that's a whole other side conversation as well. We're supposed to go to certain places. I'm supposed to be able to decorate. I can. I'm supposed to be able to dress very well. I got that one, thank God. I'm supposed to be able to cook. I cannot cook. I mean, there's all these things about like what I was told I was supposed to be when I stepped into the community and got the list of things like, okay, well, this is what gay men do, right? This is what a lesbian woman does. But what's interesting about this particular conversation and how by invisibility, by phobia, by erasure fits in is that I don't know that we ever talk about, well, what's it like to be a bisexual person, individual, and is there a right or a wrong way? We've just completely invalidated that identity by saying,
Right. I never got a user's guide. I never got my manual or my toaster oven. I didn't get any of
So I got the toaster oven.
that.
Right. And what's the ratio? That's the thing for me. What's the ratio? Because the first thing people ask is, well, how many men have you been with? Well, how many women? Well, is this a math problem now?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is there a perfect ratio that you'll agree with me?
Interesting. I did not realize that was part of the questioning that you received about this ratio. That's really quite astounding and a little disgusting.
It's always the question, and that's one of those challenge questions. Well, how many men have you been with versus how many women have you been with?
Right. And I'll add to that too, that it's very patriarchal. So one of the things about it is when you're a bisexual woman, people assume, oh, you really just like men, but you're curious and you like to play, in other areas. And when you're a bisexual man, oh, you're really just gay, but you don't want to admit it. So it's all focused on men, which is very patriarchal. It's everybody must love men. Men are the, they're the thing, right? And it's interesting how that relays in bisexual women versus bisexual men. Everyone just assumes that the man is the default, basically.
And it's also it's like focused on sex specifically. It's not about like maybe attraction or intimacy or closeness or any of the other things that can exist in a relationship with someone else. It really is just like about parts and what goes where and who puts it there, which is like just so reductive anyway. But
so let me ask, and I'm glad all of you are talking. And I'm glad, Natalie, that you brought up the ratio thing. I remember I'm a fan of Will and Grace, and you may remember when Grace was dating, I don't know, Woody Harrelson. I can't think of his name on the show, but remember they had the whole conversation about how many sex partners they had been with, and Grace had some ridiculous number, and Woody Harrelson character he said he'd been with 3. And so she thought that she had conquered the world because she had had more sex partners than him. And then it came around to, well, how many times have you had sex? And so her record was like maybe 1 or 2 times with each guy. His was, they were having sex a lot. So he had a lot more sexual encounters with the women in his life, the 3 women in his life, than she had with the multiple men in her life. And I think sometimes we do way too much on what we think the numbers should look like. How many times have you been with a man? How many times have you been with a woman? When you are with a man, do you have to think about a woman? When you're with a woman, do you have to think about a man? It can never be, I just like what I like.
Right.
Right.
And it doesn't always have to start with sex. It starts somewhere else. It leads to intimacy, not physical intimacy. And then it moves to the sex for some people. Now, a lot of us go from 0 to 200. And that's okay. That is absolutely okay. If that's who you are, that's really okay. But this thing and this conversation is really, there's so many things I'm trying to pick out to go back to. But Daryl, I wanted to, as you talked about showing up as a cisgender, I want you to talk about what that means, because I've asked some people to join in tonight, or who will look at this later, who may not know what cisgender is. So what does it mean when you show up as a cisgender person?
Yeah, so one of the ways that we talk about is gender. Gender is a construct, just like race is a construct, and people are assigned a particular gender at birth. So someone may be assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth. I was assigned a male gender at birth. I'm an AMAB in some parlance. And I feel that my identity is consistent with the assignment that I received at the time of my birth. Some folks find that the gender that they were assigned at birth is not really consistent with who they are on the inside. And there's a lot of different language around that now. You probably have heard most people talk about what it means to be transgender, which is, I won't say necessarily the opposite, but it's different from what it means to be cisgender, where where the assigned gender at birth is not consistent with who you feel you are on the inside. And that can look like a lot of different things for someone in terms of the way that they might express their gender or the way that they might feel internally. So we kind of make the distinction between being a cisgender and a transgender. And then there's stuff a lot in between those two sides of things as well. And so we talk about gender diversity. Some people might use the term non-binary, where they're not one or the other. Or some people might talk about what it means to be gender non-conforming. So there's a lot of different language around gender. But when I talk about my identity as a cis or cisgender person, I mean that the gender that I was assigned at birth I feel that's consistent with who I am internally.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to throw this one out here for you all, and this was not on my list, on the list I gave you all, nor the list that I created. Is it possible for a transgender person to show up in the world as transgender and bisexual? And if so, what can that look like?
We were just having this conversation earlier today at the shop. I swear, it's not just comic books at the comic book shop. It is a whole bunch of conversations with customers that come in. And we were having this discussion earlier today because I was really excited about coming on the show. And this one individual is non-binary and identifies as bisexual. So it is not, pick one and then going on about your way. It is who do you identify as and who do you love? Who are you attracted to? Those are all of the things that make us as whole human beings. And it's all about, your identity, your expression, and your orientation.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I think that, yes, they can do all the things, be all the things, love all the things.
Absolutely. There's a couple of things I do want to kind of point out on this. One, yes, absolutely. I actually have one of my children is all of those things. But just remembering that gender and sexuality are two totally different things. So, to take it back a step, I think it's really important to define bisexuality because, previously, and there have been some people, and there may be some people in the audience now that feel like even using the term bisexual is binary, right? And I've heard that before. Oh, you're just an old person. That's why you use bi, because we don't use that anymore. It's the binary. And I'm like, well, just because they both start with the same two letters does not mean that they're the same. The updated definition of bisexuality is having, attraction to someone of the same gender or different genders. So it's not same or opposite, it's same or different. And when you use that definition, then, you can see that it really doesn't have to be binary. But those are the 2 points I wanted to make on that. I was like, yes, you got to know this first.
Gerald, did you have a comment on that? I want to say something, and this is a term that I use just about my own journey, from my journey from struggle to acceptance to freedom. And getting through each of those was I had to drink from a different well. And, so what I want to say to the audience, whether you're listening to us tonight, you'll listen to us in the weeks to come, is the people who are on this panel tonight, Byron, Natalie, and Daryl, they have done the work of drinking from a different well. they've all grown up in a certain way where there's this term that says parents and the community and society raise children to be heterosexual. Byron said earlier, I didn't have a roadmap on how to live out this life as a bisexual cisgender man or boy child. This
Right.
is, because the world raises us in a very heteronormative society to be heterosexuals. And so, what I hear from each of you is the work that you've all done to accept who you are and then live in the freedom of who you are. And I so appreciate that. And so I say that because you have to drink from a different well. And I will go to scripture. I think it's John 4 for those who need it. The story of the woman at the well who meets Jesus, and she's had these issues and things, and he talks to her about drinking different water from a different kind of well. And so that's where I get that from. But it fits my life, because when I stopped listening to the same tired old sermons saying the same stuff about God didn't make Adam and Steve, God made Adam and Eve. And when I moved from that, when I moved from, preachers standing in the pulpit doing this and saying funny, and I began to read deeper, and I began to look at scripture from a very historical, critical perspective rather than a literal interpretation, I grew. But I had to drink from a different well, and each of you did too. And when we do that, we grow. And so, to our audience, I'll say, because there's somebody out there going, damn, I'm never going to get there. That lady, she really saying some stuff. You can find this level of love and acceptance for self if you do the work. Because look, we don't just wake up with glitter, spewing from our mouths. It takes work. It takes work to find personal acceptance. I see Torian J. Dilworth saying, one of my biggest stumbling blocks was to understand my own sexual identity and self-acceptance as a bisexual man. Yep. And I think anyone that has struggled with their own identity about sexuality and sexual identity, where stumbling block comes in for me is we choose badly. Yeah. Because we don't feel like we can choose what we really want. And so we just choose what we think the world wants for us, or the world has told us to have. And we end up in some pretty messed up situations that once we find freedom and acceptance, we got to work our way out of some of that stuff. Right. That's why I think the queer community needs to live a long time, because once we've accepted ourselves, we got a lot of good living to do. If that makes sense. We got a lot of good living to do. Daryl, Saturday evening, we did an impromptu pre-show meeting under a tree, waiting on the Pride Parade to start. And you began to share with me about the health and wellness of people who identify as bisexual, either openly or privately. And you said that by erasure, and I want you to define by erasure, often causes those health outcomes to not be as good as other persons in society. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this has really been a topic of major conversation, I would say, over the last couple of years, particularly in light of COVID, and our whole discussion about mental health has shifted in communities that have maybe been historically marginalized or racialized. So I'm having lots of conversations with folks about what it means to be Black and have a mental health condition, or trying to seek treatment for a mental health condition, trying to get an accurate diagnosis and what that means. that is also extended to queer folks, really of all kinds. And in particular, if we're talking about intersections, Black queer folks as well, really struggling with like, okay, mental health just is the conversation right now. I think we all can acknowledge that we are having lots of conversations about mental health. Thank goodness for that. And in doing some of the work and really trying to figure out like, okay, well, how can I be of even greater service to this community, and what are the messages and the conversations that we need to be having? I sort of stumbled upon a very small but important body of literature that talks about and focuses on bisexual folks of all genders, men, women, and everything, everybody in between. And really what's been interesting about this work is that it really kind of focuses on how if it's bad for lesbian women and gay men, it's even worse for someone who identifies as bisexual, which is kind of surprising, right? Like you might say, okay, well, we're all sort of, we're not a monolith, right? We're not all the same, but you might think like, well, you know, if I have a bisexual identity, or that maybe I would have some of the protections that you might see from the privilege of maybe presumed heterosexuality or heteronormativity. And it turns out that doesn't necessarily seem to track across health outcomes and mental health outcomes. So for example, it might surprise you to know that our bisexual brethren and sistren and therein are also sort of struggling with higher levels of psychological distress. So if gay men and lesbian women have sort of moderate to severe psychological distress over the last 30 days, bisexual individuals have severe psychological distress and even greater. They also may be less likely to engage in healthcare systems. They may delay getting care for a physical health or for a mental health condition. They have higher risk of developing chronic medical conditions and chronic mental health conditions like depression, anxiety. They may be more likely to smoke cigarettes. They may be more likely to struggle with alcohol use disorders, or to have a complicated relationship with substances. So again, like I think the sort of the bottom line here is like, yes, if it's bad for lesbian women and gay men, in many cases, it's even worse for someone who's bisexual. Now, obviously, there is wide range in that, but if we're talking about risk and what it means to maybe carry a risk or be predisposed to the development of certain kinds of mental health or medical conditions, I think we really have to begin shifting our focus in the conversation to really include and be much more inclusive of folks that have bisexual identity or that identify as bisexual. You mentioned this concept of bi erasure, and then we were talking about this the other day. And what I seem to recall kind of saying to you, like, listen, you know, if I say to someone, I am gay, even if they're homophobic, they don't say to me, well, being gay isn't real. If someone says like, I'm a lesbian, they may say, I don't like you being a lesbian, but they don't say that lesbianism is not real. Unfortunately, if someone says that I am bisexual, you have, as was mentioned before, this category of folks who tell someone like your identity isn't real. And it's so invalidating. Now, you may not like me, you may be afraid of me. There may be, there's a phobia there, but there's not like necessarily erasure in the same way that you experience as a person living as a bisexual or with a bisexual identity. So I think that like to me is why you experience, or you can we can see this greater risk among folks that identify as bisexual. There's also this like, where do I fit in betwixt and between aspect of it? And I mean, Natalie and Byron can talk about it certainly better than I can. But I think, you know, if your identity is defined as like a stopover on your way to like a real identity, this language that people sometimes use, which, you know, certainly at this stage in my journey, I'm like, that's just disgusting. Let people just get out of people's business in that way. But we all know that people have like talked about bisexuality as a stopover to another kind of identity. Again, a type of invalidation and erasure that can ultimately contribute to like, well, you don't see me. Not only do you not see me, you don't believe that I'm here. You don't believe that I exist. And that goes somewhere psychologically, that goes somewhere emotionally and mentally. And then you have to sort of wrestle with like all of these aspects of it. And so I'm not just saying like I'm here and I'm queer. Like, it's like I'm here, I'm bisexual, I'm real, I exist, like I'm real. Like this is a real thing. And that's, I think, an aspect of like being gay or lesbian that we just don't necessarily have to wrestle with in the same way.
Wow, I'm real. I love that. I love that, Daryl. Thank you. Natalie, you and I also had a conversation about bi erasure and bi invisibility. Kind of talk to us about it from your perspective as a bisexual woman.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Shorter. What you just said was incredibly validating. I was actually on a program through work through our resource group and it was the first bisexual focused programming in this queer space that had happened, and I felt so incredibly seen at that in that programming. And one of the things that came up there was the monosexual privilege list, right? Um, and it was basically what you were speaking of, whether you're straight or gay, regardless of what people feel about it, they know it's a real thing. That's absolutely true. And if someone sees you with your partner, they validate that as well. So for example, right now I'm dating a man, and there are times in the back of my head I'm like, do we have to go out? Because I love him to death, but when we're out, people assume this is just a straight couple. And I'm not straight just because I'm with him right now, And conversely, when I'm dating a woman and we go out, it's automatically, now I don't feel as bad about this, I'll just be honest, but they're like, oh, there's a lesbian couple, so it's really your how you're seen in the world then becomes who you're with. And that's invalidating as well, because as I told it's funny when we got together, it's a new relationship and everything, right? So when we got together, of course, I'm very out, I'm very open, and we were having a conversation, and my boyfriend goes, oh, you're still bisexual, but you're with me now. And I said, dear, you are in a queer relationship now because you are in a relationship with a queer woman. Just because I'm with you now does not negate the fact that I still have attraction to, connection with, and whatever else. I am monogamous, and polyamory is a thing, and that's one of the biggest things just in dating that you have to navigate, because here's a whole, not to kind of, I feel like I'm all over the place now, but in the dating kind of scene, what you get is, oh, you can't possibly be monogamous because you're bisexual. And that's a thing that you have to, overcome too, because it's like, yeah, just because like if I was straight and I dated men, you're not going to think that I'm going to date every other man out there. And it's the same way, and so it's a thing that you have to navigate, and people have their issues and what have you. But to try to bring it back around to the point, it's a lot. It's a lot of you're not real. You're just kind of experimenting, running around. Whoever you're with is who your true, self is, and all of those things really just invalidate you as a complete, full human being, and you constantly have to remind people of who you are, because they will easily forget. They'll just do context clues and they'll just be like, oh, well, okay.
Natalie, to come back to the Lord. This is when they see you with a man. But you said, I'm going to go to Byron, but you said some things that I want to circle back to. I hope so. Write them down just in case I forget. You talked about polyamory. That's not a term that everyone is familiar with, so I'm going to come back to that. You also said, and this is one of the things that you shared with me, that you said to your boyfriend that you know, sir, you are in a queer relationship because you're in a relationship with a queer woman. Um, I just have to ask, what was his response to that?
Well, he's amazing. So his response was like, "Oh, okay." You know, it was just, I hadn't thought of it that way. All
Okay.
right, I guess I am, and he's been really good about learning, sometimes a little much. Like I'll come over and he'll have on like the comedy special, the what was it, Stand Out on Netflix or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so it's like I'm gonna learn all the things about the community, right? Which
But
is
look, that's good because some
cute.
people don't want to do the work,
Yeah,
you
right.
know. So he's like the P flag for dates and partners. That's
Yeah.
good. That's good. So Byron, when you hear the term bi erasure or bi invisibility, as a bisexual black man, what does that say to you and your personal experience?
My personal experience, it is my personal experience. I just want to repeat that. My personal experience, it tends to be the opposite of my bisexual sister because if I encounter someone of the opposite sex or someone who is not of the same sex, um, it's a definite uphill battle half the time. Once I uh, divulge that information, I'm either totally ghosted or they come with 50 million questions, and then there's this constant uh, process of reassurance that I'm not going to, I don't know, all of a sudden become, the guy in How Stella Got Her Groove Back, where it's like, what was it, her husband, where it's like all of a sudden I'm just going
Yeah.
to just like do some really scandalous things to you. It's like, first of all, uh, my orientation does not require me to do all the things with all the people all the time. As a individual, I'm a I'm a single focused person. If I'm dating you, my focus and attention is on you. So yeah, I have to, provide that reassurance. And less so when I'm dating men. Um but it does come up. It
Mhm.
does come up, but not as frequently because men, uh, again, my experience, bisexual men have had such a negative um,
Mhm.
reputation, and be it in the media, whether it's real or imagined. Uh, yeah, just being openly bisexual, and I always lead with that. I'm openly bisexual because I don't want you to misinterpret my life and my existence as some kind of, I don't know, me, some type of boogeyman,
Mhm.
just, full of trickery and, you know, I don't know. Um, I, I'm in a relationship now and I am happy, uh, with being with that person. It's a man. I am happy with that person, and the previous relationship that I was in was with a woman, and it sadly ended because uh, the thing that she was attracted to about me was my openness and my honesty. Was the thing that she just could not, in the end, wrap her head around. She needed these constant reassurances that I was not going to do XYZ, whatever was in her head that I was going to do. She needed me to constantly reassure her of that. And it was too exhausting. It was too much work. Um, I care for you. I care for you deeply, but if you need that, then that's your job, not mine.
And so this begs the question, and thank you, Byron, for sharing that.
Yeah, I didn't get a P flag partner.
Right. So this begs the question, and this is, people who are partners or want to entertain a relationship with a bisexual person, and they want these guarantees. Do we require the same guarantee in a heteronormative relationship? I know we want it, but are we
Or
really
or a homonormative.
all
Dr.
homonormative?
Shorter.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah,
Daryl
that's
Short.
homo. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the expectation if 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 you're in a relationship, if you identify as a heterosexual person and you are in a relationship with someone who identifies as a heterosexual person, and I'm going to ask Daryl, do you think what's that thought around the level of comfort
Yeah.
or being able to breathe and relax and say, we're good?
So it's interesting. I was thinking about the value of fidelity, right? So either you value fidelity or not, and that is not linked to or related to your sexual identity or orientation or whatever terminology you use. So if you decide that you are in a monogamous or a polyamorous, Natalie, that's going to be you as well. You're going to talk about what it means to be poly. You can have fidelity with one partner or with multiple partners because it's about the agreement that you and that person or persons has made about who you are going to be with. And that doesn't have anything to do with the who of the who you are doing whatever with, right? So if you value fidelity, then that's the issue. So really what people are sort of struggling with is that they find these partners and these folks out here who can't really live up to that particular value in the context of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that could mean that they maybe need a different kind of relationship or a different kind of partner, but it sort of creates an opportunity to invite a different kind of conversation. And depending on who you ask, there's a bunch of psychologists that talk about like how infidelity and cheating can be a way of opening up a relationship to explore and have deeper conversations. And there's other folks that believe it's quite the opposite and that it's a sign of like deep selfishness and narcissism if somebody is unable to be faithful. So I want to talk about it with perhaps a little bit less judgment, but to say that like ultimately it's important that you know what your values regarding fidelity are, A of all, and then B through Z of all, try to find a partner who mirrors or shares your values regarding fidelity.
There's that's a whole 6-week course right there. Yeah, because that is understanding first and foremost what fidelity is, then understanding what fidelity means to you. And then, of course, the last week is finding a partner who has that same value of fidelity.
Because the reality is that in certain relationships, and I'm talking about all kinds of relationships, there are certain things that are permissible to certain partners and things that are not permissible. And there's a sexual fidelity, there's an emotional fidelity. So some people might be like, I don't care. You're at the gym and you like have a moment with somebody in the steam room. I don't care. But if you get their number after you're done, that is cheating. Okay, well, that you've now introduced a whole bunch of complexity into what your understanding of fidelity is in your relationship, right? Some people are like very black and white about it. It's all or nothing. Like you either are in this relationship or you are not. Okay, but there's all kinds of emotional entanglements. Thank you, Jada and Will. There's all kinds of emotional entanglements that people can get involved in that don't have anything to do with something sexual. And those can be just as threatening and damaging to a relationship if it has not been discussed ahead of time and you all haven't like figured out that that's what you're doing. And so really fidelity is the issue, but it gets wrapped up in like the biphobia. And because we haven't really had a nuanced conversation about sexual orientation and identity, that people like conflate the two and they really don't even need to. Because I have plenty of friends on both sides, straight and gay, who are in these busted relationships with people where they're not on one accord when it comes to the value of fidelity, and that they stay in these relationships being dishonored, disrespect, busted, dishonored, disrespect, whatever it is, because they're not in agreement about their values. And that's where you got to start.
And you're right, Gerald. That's of every gender, every orientation, every type of relationship that is living, breathing, and existing right now. And I do believe that it is that because we really don't have a roadmap. We think we got a roadmap, particularly on the heteronormative side. We think there's a roadmap. We think grandma and grandpa were the roadmap. We think Uncle Buddy and Aunt Susie were the roadmap, or we think this, but it's not. It's not, because we never knew what was really going on. I know that, I don't know if y'all have seen Rothaniel. Have y'all seen Rothaniel on, I think it's HBO Plus? It's Gerard Carmichael when he does his stand-up, but he comes out, but he talks about the examples that he saw of infidelity from his grandfather and from his father, and how that impacted him. Not necessarily to be, it didn't disable, or it didn't keep him from being, I guess, able to be in a monogamous relationship, but it helped. It sort of exacerbated that struggle that he was having in being free as a Black gay man. And so that's work that we have to do. That's why I said earlier that, gay people need some extra years to live after we've done most of the work to at least exhale. And let me change from gay and say queer people to be inclusive. We've done most of the work, and we've gotten to a place where we can exhale and we can relax and we can be happy, and we've worked out the things. We know what we want to bring to a relationship. We know what we need the relationship to bring to us. We know we don't want a relationship, whatever it is. But just to wake up every day and live as a human being, we need some extra years to be able to live that out. We're talking about that. We're going to see if we can arrange that. Natalie, you were getting ready to say something, and when you say that, I want you to just expound a little bit on polyamory.
Sure thing. So I'll probably be all over the place again. But what I was saying as Daryl was talking, or as he finished, was communication. That is the ultimate, love language, really, because you have to communicate who you are. You have to communicate what you want, what you don't want, what you and the person that you are entering into relationship with agree on, because bringing polyamory into it. So polyamory is a valid form of relationship. It's something that people agree to do. They agree on ethical non-monogamy, which is basically they have multiple partners. They a lot of times agree on a certain set of rules for their situation, but it is very, very, I don't want to say structured, but the communication is ongoing. And it is a lot. I'm not polyamorous. I'm a Leo. I'm a bit selfish, so I just right. The attention. But I do have, I have friends that are in very successful polyamorous relationships. And the thing about it, as I mentioned, is the communication is not just, we're going to sit down right now, we're going to have this conversation and lay out what we're going to do. It's ongoing. If something happens and they're like, I thought that would be okay, but I feel differently, they have a conversation about that too. There have been times where I'm like, dang, y'all talking about this again, but it's ongoing communication. And that's what's so important. And the thing that I wanted to point out after Byron spoke, a couple things. One, I've actually been, I don't know if saying on both sides of the equation is the correct way to say it, but I've actually, before I came out as a bisexual woman, I was in a relationship with a bisexual man. So I've been, there as well. And, having people kind of in your ear saying, well, do you think you can trust him, or do you think, he really wants this, kind of thing. And we were very much in love. I mean, we're still great friends to this day, but there was those people, right? And they have that. And the last thing I want to say, and not necessarily last, but to your point, Byron, was I had to kiss a lot of frogs before I got to that P flag partner. And I mean, male and female. I had, there were women who were like, I don't date bisexual women. I only date lesbians because you're dirty. Like, there are literally lesbian women who will call me dirty because I've been with a man. I mean, that's just real, right? And there have been men who are like, I'm not going to date a bisexual woman because you're automatically going to cheat on me. I'm like, what? Okay. And it's just, it just comes from everywhere. It comes from within the community. It comes from without the community. And I think, I'm so grateful that you're having this conversation, because it's really needed. We exist, right? We exist, and we shouldn't have to choose. Right. I'm sorry. I like lots of different things. I shouldn't have to choose, Byron shouldn't have to choose. Anyone else, should not have to choose to be validated as a human being in their fullness. So, yeah.
I always say at the end of the day, it's like, I choose to love and be loved.
Exactly.
So, end of that.
End of it. I shared this morning with someone that I had sent the invite for this call or this show to a family member, and they says, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah." I said they need to evolve in order to help someone else in their family. They needed to hear this, and that's what I want to say to all of you tonight. I think what you're saying, not what you said, but what you're saying, because this is an ongoing conversation, is helping people to evolve. It's helping them to grow. Some people will listen and they're not going to get it the first time through. I didn't get it just about my own self, my own stuff. I didn't get it the first time through. It took many, many times of coming back, saying, okay, I want to hear, I want to listen, I want to grow, before I said, okay, I can accept who I am. And I think, and I think that about, and I'm leading up to something, I think that's about family members as well. So I want to know from each of you, as we're coming to a close, living a proud life, what would you say to a mother or father, a child, or a sibling who is struggling with how their loved one is showing up in the world on the queer spectrum, whether they don't understand it? The Bible say, whatever that is, what would each of you individually say to that person tonight?
I never have any sage words of wisdom. Like I said earlier, it's,
Byron,
I tend to be.
Your voice is full of sage. Come on.
Sage and thyme and paprika, right? I often just use my lived experiences as any type of advice, and I use those examples, whether they are good or bad. I use those examples of my coming out as a teenager, of my life as a young adult, all of the things that I went through to get here. I use that, and if that comes out as I don't know, Obi-Wan or Yoda, cool. If it comes out as just word vomit, still cool. But you'll figure it out. just, like the old folk, keep living.
Just keep living. Thank you, Byron. Natalie, what about you?
So I actually think I do have something, only because not even honestly for myself, but as the mother of a trans son and going through that experience, being non-religious, but then my mom, his grandmother, his father, being religious and saying, well, it's just not right. What I told them at that time, and this is, he's 21 now, thankfully. And he came out at 16. And what I told them was, you would rather have an alive child than a child who fits into your mold.
Yeah.
If all it takes is for me to accept my child for who he is, for him to be alive and to thrive and to, be this now man that's still living with me and driving me nuts, just like any other 21-year-old man, right? If all it takes for him to have that experience and that life is for me to just accept him, it's a no-brainer.
Right.
It's a no-brainer. And that's what, that's what I told my mom. That's what I told his mom. And, my mom still, she is a church lady. She goes and she works at the church and she, she is church lady, but she loves her grandson. She actually took her grandson to get his top surgery and she nursed him all the way back to health. Not that he was sick or anything like that, but afterwards, because I'm single mom, I'm working, right?
Right.
She's like, no, come stay with me. He stayed with her. She did his drains. Hopefully I'm not getting too much here, but she did his medical assistance during that time. And that was one of those moments where I was just like, okay, maybe your words meant something. Maybe her love for her grandson overcame, her love for order and church and whatever else it was, because that's what it boiled down to. This is life. And we would rather have them alive and thriving than fitting into your box.
Wow. And I do want to say, because I'm looking at some of the comments, there are some people that are just talking about how much you all are helping them this evening. And I just happen to know all of them, and I'm glad they're on. Daryl, so what do you say to that person that's struggling with how someone else that they love shows up in the world on a daily basis?
I really don't think I could say it better than Byron and Natalie already have. I was thinking about your job is to love and accept, not judge. And that, one of the other things I was thinking about is like love in action. And I think Natalie's example just really sort of epitomizes how we talk about how people can love and accept their queer loved one. And it's not just about you sort of thinking and agreeing and saying the word, but then not following through with the appropriate action, whatever that looks like. And so, we talk about love being in action. Sometimes we talk about love being in action. I talk about forgiveness being in action all the time, because it makes me, because I'm like, shoot, that means I have to do something. And sometimes I don't want to do something. And that's true for love as well. So I appreciate what's been said about that. The one thing I will add that has not been said is that everybody gets a journey. And I think about this as it relates to my own family. And, this is, I won't out him too bad, but, I was not close to my father for a number of years after I came out. And long story short, by the time I got married to my husband, my dad gave the prayer at our wedding reception. My dad's a minister, like his father before him. And now, I'm in the process of moving my parents from Chicago to Houston so that they can be closer to us. And it's funny because I've been saying in therapy, never in a million years did I imagine that I would be relocating my dad and my mother, but my dad in particular, to Houston to be like close to us and in our lives. And I mean, he adores my husband. Everybody adores my husband. He's adorable. What can I say? But suffice that to say, like, I would not have expected or anticipated that. Oh, thank you. That this would be the trajectory that we were on, that we would have reached a point of like love and acceptance, because what I encountered very early on was just judgment. And now he kind of shows up in my life in a way that is really quite surprising and somewhat astounding at times. But you know, this is not my therapy session. I had it earlier this week. So
That's good. I appreciate all of you. And I will say, and thank you for saying this is not your therapy session, but because what I do want to say is, what would I say to, I'm going to answer the question that I ask you all. Sometimes you as the family member, and this would be the brother, the sister, the husband, the wife, the mom, the dad, the child, you may need to take some time in therapy to help you reconcile your fears, to help you evolve and learn and grow. And that's important. And I think, as Natalie, you said it in so many words, that if you value that person, and you value their life and the love and the joy that they bring to you, then, you know, going to a therapist for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 52 weeks, it's worth it. It's worth it. Whether they're showing up as on any level of the spectrum, the queer spectrum, gay, bisexual, lesbian, transgender, non-binary, as we talk about gender, non-binary, transgender. It's important because that person, I think, has been put in your life for a purpose, and you've been put in their lives for a purpose. And I don't think giving them hell is the reason for it, about how they show up in the world every day. Natalie, Byron, Daryl, I thank all of you for coming out tonight, showing up tonight for Soul Talk, and what I call conversations that heal. And I think that there's been some healing that has happened tonight in the World Wide Web, on Facebook Live. This will show up on the AFH website, AFH YouTube page. There is healing that will come out of this conversation on tonight. Individuals, I believe, as they listen to this and process this, will be able to hold their head up higher. They'll be able to sleep a little better. They'll be able to show up in every room in the fullness of who they are and be confident. And Daryl, you said it earlier, we often use the term coming out or come out, but many of us, we get to a place where we stop coming out and we just start inviting people in to our world. Not to give explanations and not to have a whole bunch of additional coming out stories and meetings. Again, that's what I love about Facebook. I just put it on Facebook. They'll read it. They'll get it. And they love me and I love them. But I do want to say, just on behalf of AFH, I really appreciate our executive director, particularly John Huckabee, giving me the space to have these conversations as we continue in our 40th year to show up as an agency that is intended upon ending the HIV epidemic, offering PrEP, offering housing and supportive services, testing for HIV and other STIs. And there it is right there. To set up a PrEP appointment, go to afhprep.org and you can set up an appointment to engage in housing and supportive services, there's a number, and I hope Dexter can type it out fast enough, but it's 713-623-6796. Or you can call that number too, 832-234-7737. We will get you where you need to go. I promise you. If I didn't think that, I wouldn't work there. I'm that serious about what I do. So thank you, Natalie, Byron, Daryl. Thank you again. We're going to go backstage and have a little post-show debrief. We appreciate you all for tuning in tonight. Thank you so much, and know that you are loved. And as my therapist does at the end of a session.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.